You're not going to find anybody that is just like you because you are unique. You have your personality. You have your background. You have your history. You have your story of your life, and they have theirs as well. Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening. Are you struggling with making those connections with other homeschool moms and other families that homeschool? Or maybe you have some connections, you have some homeschool friends, but you would like to add some more. Today's episode is going to help you to find those like-minded homeschool families. There are certain seasons in life that I felt like having other friends and being in community and being in more communication with friends was really important. And this was especially when my kids were younger. And maybe it's just me, or my set of friends, but I have noticed a transition as our kids have gotten older. We don't always have the time for a lot of relationship time together. So as our kids have gotten older, lives have gotten a little bit busier. Sometimes I'm like, hey, you want to come visit me? Come visit me because I don't have a car. I have kids that have my car and they're out and about and I'm at home. But as our kids get older, things just kind of shift. And I think it also is a little bit of a shifting with our kids and they kind of become a bit more of friends of ours, if that makes some sense to you. And I guess just overall just don't necessarily have the time. Maybe our worlds just get a little bit smaller. I'm kind of looking forward to hopefully that next season where maybe it gets a little bit a little bit bigger again. But honestly, you'll find me at home most days with my family because it's just is enough right now. But when my kids were younger, it was so important for me to have communication with others. And maybe it's also a bit of a personality too. So it might not necessarily have to do with season or age, but just a personality as well. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting to have community and with wanting to feel like you aren't the only one in your town, in your city that is homeschooling and has a similar set of values and a biblical worldview. When we started homeschooling, you've heard me mention many times that I had one friend who homeschooled and we weren't super close, but guess what? We became super close because of the homeschooling. And I just loved her, loved being able to talk to her about homeschooling. Now, she homeschooled in a very different style than we did, but it didn't matter. That's the thing we have to get to when it comes to homeschooling. Your bestest, closest homeschool mom friends could homeschool completely different than you, and that is okay. That shouldn't be the determining factor of whether you're friends or not. Sometimes we meet friends because maybe we are homeschooling in a certain way and there are co-ops that do that, and so we are able to meet other moms, or there are certain other groups. There's just things that we go to that moms will gravitate because you homeschool in a certain style and in a certain way, and then you can make those friends. But as we then started to homeschool a bit more, I started to make more friends, and guess what? I even converted a few of my friends into homeschoolers. I was kind of like the one at our church that people would contact secretly and be like, I think might homeschool. I'm like, come on over. Our kids had a Wednesday night thing at church, and I was like, just come home with me. I lived a couple minutes from church. Like, come home with me, and we can talk about it, and no one will know that this is what we're talking about, so you don't have to tell anybody before you actually make that decision. And then we moved states, and we found some amazing friends, and we have been here for 9 years. And at that time, these friends filled such a need that we had for just friends in general, because we were moving to a different state and didn't know anybody here. But also, God really answered a prayer because a lot of the families that we knew of that were homeschooling all had younger kids. I had the oldest kids, with my 2 older especially. And so when we moved, God brought us to friends who had kids of the same age range as well as older kids, which was such a blessing because I didn't know anybody that had homeschooled middle school, high school, and I graduated homeschoolers at that time. So it was so good. And so all of these friends that I still have, some of them have graduated all of their kids, and they still are so supportive of me as I'm still homeschooling my last one, but they're still such a blessing in my life. We all had different ways of homeschooling. We still do homeschool differently. We might have different parameters and different things that we say yes to and no to than each other, but that's okay. We still have respect for each other, and we still all have the undergirding basis there of why we are homeschooling. So if you and I were to sit down over a cup of coffee or hot cocoa or tea, whatever it is you like to warm yourself up with here in February, this is what I would say to you if you are looking for friends. The first thing is to know what you are looking for. What types of friends are you looking for? Who is going to add life and pour life into you and give you life and not suck life from you or cause drama? Know what types of friends, what types of families that you are looking for. Now, you don't need to be legalistic. As I just mentioned, I have friends who kids have not watched movies that we have allowed our children to watch. Do I hold that against them? No. Do they hold that against me? I hope not. I mean, we're still friends. So not necessarily in a legalistic way, unless that is something that is super important to you. So major on the majors, minor on the minors. And so don't necessarily rule some people out because you might see some of the secondary or tertiary things differently, but still have a plumb line. Have that basis, have that plumb line that you are going to use as if they're doing this or they're doing that, then I just don't feel comfortable. So it could be things like deciding, when we're trying to major on the majors and minor on the minors, you might say, well, I do not feel comfortable using a certain curriculum. And you meet this family and they're lovely and wonderful and the kids are getting along well and you're really enjoying the mom. You guys have a lot in common. And then you find out that they use that curriculum. Then you have to decide, how important is that to you? Is that like a deal breaker? I hope it's not. I mean, unless this curriculum is something that is worshiping the occult or something like that, that's glorifying that, which I highly doubt. If you're getting along that well and you don't see that as a good thing, then I highly doubt you would have gotten that far in the friendship or the play date or whatever it is. But just knowing that that doesn't have to be a deal breaker and not to be legalistic about it, but have that plumb line. And so if then they do start talking, everything seems wonderful, they do start talking about a curriculum that is obviously anti-biblical, then maybe that would be a deal breaker. But again, you're going to see some clues. You're going to know some things. You're going to kind of sniff out some things before that. But have that plumb line. Don't necessarily need to be legalistic because guess what? You're never going to find anyone that is just exactly like you. You might find some homeschool mom friends that homeschool very similarly. They might have some different philosophies when it comes to motherhood and what they allow their kids to do and what you don't allow your kids to do. And it could be completely opposite. You're not going to find anybody that is just like you because you are unique. You have your personality. You have your background. You have your history. You have your story of your life and they have theirs as well. And then you put you and your husband together and her and her husband together and they have their own family culture. You all might really enjoy being outside and taking hikes together, but she might be more strict about doing a very rigorous math curriculum and you're a bit more free-for-all. That doesn't mean you can't be friends. You can be friends, okay? So have a plumb line, but don't be legalistic and don't rule somebody out because of just some of the minor things. And remember that you won't find anyone that's just like you. So you're like, well, how am I going to even meet this person to be able to make this decision? Sometimes we can live in areas where it's really difficult to meet homeschoolers. And even though homeschooling is growing, you can look at statistically the amount of homeschoolers that has greatly grown here in the United States. I mean, the chances of running into them randomly at the grocery store and you guys like clicking right away and it being like, wow, this is like the perfect best friends for us is very slim. Our lives are just kind of going in different directions and a lot of homeschoolers are kind of just home a lot, right? The home part of schooling. So how do we make some of these introduction? How do we find people? And that is first to ask around. You just need to find one homeschool mom. And I can guarantee she knows at least one other homeschool mom. And that other homeschool mom knows at least one other homeschool mom. Make some introductions happen. When we moved to New York from Pennsylvania, started going to a church and started meeting some people, and then they would ask, oh, where do you live? Where do your kids go to school? It's like, oh, we live in this town and we homeschool. And they would say, oh, there's homeschoolers here. Or, oh, so-and-so homeschools, as if I knew who that person was. I was like, no, listen, I just moved to the state a couple of months ago. I don't know who that is. And so James and I would laugh. We're like, oh, everybody's like, oh, there's so many homeschoolers here. And we're like, okay, where are they hiding? Help us. And so we got to the point where we'd be like, oh, that's great. Can you introduce me to that person? And like made them walk us over to them and introduce us to them. Sometimes we're like, oh, I don't see them here. Maybe they're at the other service. And so I would get a name. And then the next time I try to find somebody I knew or ask a greeter, hey, is so-and-so here? And so kind of just forcing those introductions to happen to actually get face-to-face with somebody else that homeschools. Now, the next suggestion is going to sound a little wild, and you're going to need to put on your big girl pants and get your thick skin on. But that would be to post in some local Facebook groups. But be aware, people can be ruthless. So know what you're looking for. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid to put it out there and say, hey, are there any homeschool families that are homeschooling from a biblical worldview, or however you want to phrase it, whatever it is that is important to you, you could list a couple of things. And there are going to be those that are going to take offense to that. If somebody posted in a local Facebook group that they were looking for homeschool friends that were literally the opposite of how I homeschool and how my family views the world and what we teach our children, I wouldn't take the time to go into that and shame them for that. I would just keep scrolling on past. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's one family that I won't be friends. We won't be close friends with. We'll pray for them. But there's people who can't scroll past. They have to make you feel ashamed. And so that is their problem. That is not your problem. Go back in, delete it. Sometimes you can post anonymously in a group, but that's going to be really difficult then for that person to know who you are. Maybe you post anonymously and then you can then go into messages and message each other. But you can post in some local Facebook groups. They're fairly easy to find, just doing some search in Facebook for them. But put your thick skin on and don't be offended. Don't take offense. And once maybe you've made one or two connections, just go ahead and delete that comment, that post that you had made, so that you don't have to worry about any more comments coming from that. My fourth bit of advice here is that you might have to kiss a few frogs before you actually find your prince. Is that the saying? I'm not really quite sure. But I think you might know what I mean. You might need to try out some families and find out whether you jive, whether you click, whether your kids are getting along well, and whether you see this as people that you want to be able to do life with and do it well, and be somebody who is a source of encouragement to you and that you can be a support to them as well. It's okay to set up some play dates with some friends or a potential friends and then not ever see them again. You might be like, you know what? On paper, it seemed like it was going to work, but it just did not quite work out. That's okay. You tried it out and it didn't work out. It just means that cross them off the list and move down to the next people. Number 5 here, kind of a fun one. A great way to find like-minded homeschool mom friends is to find those friends that aren't homeschooling their children and convert them to homeschooling. Whether they're kids, now this might be a little bit harder because their kids, if they're in school already, that's a little bit harder. But maybe you have just young children and you have some friends whose kids are not in school yet. See if you can maybe convert them. Bring them over here to the dark side of homeschooling. Not really dark. Bring them over to the light, actually. Bring them to the side of homeschooling. Show them homeschooling. Introduce them to homeschooling. Teach them about homeschooling. Let them see what it's like. And how fun would that be if you had some friends that you just get along really well with and you're able to introduce and help them begin homeschooling? That would just be so cool, right? I know I had done that with some friends, and we are still friends to this day. So really fun. The last bit of advice I'd like to give is that sometimes when we are looking for like-minded families, we feel like we have to have a lot of families. we feel like we have to have a dozen or 2 dozen or even just half a dozen families that we connect with and that we spend a lot of time with. That's not the truth. That's not really what we need. That's a little bit, to me, I take that a little bit as that's what the school teaches us, is that we have to have a lot of friends. We need to be the popular people. And that just kind of gets stuck into our brains and thinking that we have to have a lot of friends and everybody has to like us and want to hang out with us. But that's not true. Once we grow up, get out of school, let's get out of that school mindset. Let's de-school some of that out of us. That's just kind of tucked down deep. To be honest, 1 to 2 families that are like-minded like you is enough. It's actually more than enough. Because even when you get together, say you have 3 kids, one of them has 4 kids, one has 2 kids. I mean, how many kids is that all together when you get together and you get husbands and wives all together? That's a big group of, that's enough, right? How fun would that be to just 2 other families and you do some campfires with s'mores at night in somebody's backyard, or maybe somebody has a pool, or you go on a hike, or Sunday after church you get together and have lunch, and the kids all take naps around in the living room. I don't know. Whatever kind of fun stuff you want to do, and it can be during the week. It can be moms that you are in communication with. It's harder when you have more and more friends. If you were trying to keep up with the homeschooling of, say, even 5 different friends, that's a lot more. That's a lot more to add to your plate. So don't feel like you have to. Just keeping up with 1 or 2, that actually is enough. And it keeps you a little bit more sane, keeps you from feeling overwhelmed or more burdened that you have to carry more people through homeschooling. So it is okay if you have a group, you guys get together and maybe you go on a hike every Friday or meet at a playground or take turns at different people's houses, or you meet up at a community center and use the gym, and say there's 10 different families. There might be 1 or 2 from there that you really connect with outside of that time. And I think that's actually much more doable and just much more beautiful, be able to actually really get to know 1 or 2 other moms as opposed to trying to get to know the other 9 moms all on a deep level. So I hope this has encouraged you. There are moms that are out there that are like-minded. If you live in an area that's a bit more rural, you might have to travel further. It might not happen for a while. There were some years where I really felt more alone, didn't necessarily have those connections, and it did feel a little bit lonely. I'm not going to lie. I am going to tell you that it did feel a little bit lonely. But if you're feeling like that, whether you're feeling a little lonely or you're not, you just like some more input from some like-minded moms that are thinking similarly to you, might do things a little bit differently. And hey, they might use a curriculum that you are like, I would never use that curriculum, but they love it. Major on the majors, minor on the minors, let those things go. But if you're looking for some friends to be able to get some input and to bounce some ideas off of, we would love to have you over in our private Facebook group. You can find the link for that in the show notes. We'd love to have you over there and ask questions and answer questions and be able to get some input just from a larger group. Not too large, but then also you don't have that pressure of having to keep up with everybody, but you can get some ideas. I know there's some Facebook groups out there and you could throw out an idea and you're going to get a bunch of crazy answers. From this Facebook group, from my Facebook group, you're not going to get that. You're going to get some input from some other moms, and they're all just very genuine, and you are not going to get what you might get in some other Facebook groups, and it's been such a blessing. So would love to have you over there, and would love to also hear about how you have met some homeschool mom friends. So jump into the Facebook group and let us know that as well, and encourage other moms who are looking for some friends that are within their own communities to be able to do the homeschool mom life with.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.